We're going to end the day with a really special treat for you guys. This is a lady that I've had the privilege of being acquainted with since our very first training. And she is going to take the stage and share with us her experience and insights and how music can help bring about social and environmental change. So if you'll please help me in welcoming Kathy Mattea.
Hello. I am Kathy Mattea, and I am a recovering country music star. It's true, I used to be famous back in the 80s. I had the giant country music perm and the shoulder pads and the whole 9 yards. So I'm confessing to you now so that we have nothing unspoken between us. I appreciate those who want to stay. If anyone wants to stand up for a second and let your numb butt kind of get the feeling back, I will not take that personally. I'll be actually really encouraged that you might not be in excruciating pain while I'm talking to you. While you stand up, I'll just tell you for the trainees, by the end of tomorrow, you will be swimming in the minutia that lives in Al Gore's head. You'll be terrified that you're drowning in it and that you will never find your way out. But I'm living proof and here to share with you a little bit of my story of how I found a life jacket in the middle of all of that detail and incredible brain power. So if they can get my computer working, I hope, I pray that it will. Great. No? Yes? Well, since I trained with the Climate Project, my life got really changed, and in ways that I could never really predict from where I started. I've done things I never thought I could do. I've done things I thought I had no business doing. I'd done things that I thought I had no skill set for. And that's been one of the really surprising things about this, and I think that's part of why Maggie asked me if I would like to come and talk to you all. It's better with pictures, but Mr. Gore says you have to be able to do it without pictures, just in case your projector doesn't work. And I want to tell you all right now, for all of you people just being trained, this is not how it's going to be. Your screen will not be this beautiful or this big. You will not have the lovely high-definition monitors in front of you or the world-class sound crew and tech crew to help you. My first presentation was in a high school cafeteria, which was a new building. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, and my presentation was at 6 o'clock in the evening in the summer. So I put my slides up, and nothing showed on the screen. So that was my baptism by fire, as it were. So we gathered everyone. There were about 300 people in this room, and we gathered them all around screens about this big. So it was that's not mine. That's not mine. That's not meant for you to see. You're not supposed to know this stuff. This is all stuff you're not even supposed to know that I'm thinking about or that I've ever even suggested. So just pay no attention to the girl behind the curtain. Avert your eyes and the magic will begin. All right. Okay, wait a minute. No. I keep various I keep various versions of this kind of all in one place and edit it for different groups and different lengths of time. Okay, so the picture is now up correctly on my computer, but I don't see it behind me. Hi. Oh, deep joy. Oh, joy. Thank you. Thank you very much. I've used all my time, and I appreciate it. So this is a picture of my hometown, Charleston, West Virginia, and this is the capital of West Virginia. It's a small state in the eastern United States in the mountains. It's very sparsely populated, and it's very rural, hard to get to. And that's the capital city, and that's a barge pushing coal up the river. My brother sent that barge out on that river. That's his job. He sends coal to the electrical plants up and down the Kanawha and the Mississippi River. And this whole thing has been such a journey for me. Even that slide has a completely different meaning for me today than it did when I started this whole process. For me, this whole journey started in 2006 in the early part of the year. This is a picture of my home state, and the red county is Upshur County, West Virginia. And on January 2nd, in 2006, there was a big explosion at this mine, the Sago mine. And there were 14 miners underground, coal miners, who were trapped for 4 days. 13 miners. And so this became a national story and actually a story around the world. And it was made much more dramatic and tragic because for a while a false report got out that they were all alive. And when they reached all the miners, all but one had died. And it was a really surprising experience for me because I found myself grieving for these people as if I knew them personally. They were in a part of my home state I've never been in. I've never met any of them. And I was completely baffled by the grief I was feeling. I'd be driving down the interstate at 3 in the afternoon and just burst into tears for people I didn't know in a part of the state I'd never been. It was kind of surprising. So I'm going to tell you about 3 things that happened to me, how they seemed completely unrelated, and they all came together in a moment to sort of change kind of the focus of a lot of my life. This was less than 2 weeks after that mine disaster. And across my fax machine in my home office came an invitation from Vanderbilt University. And so it was for my husband and I, and we decided to go. It sounded really interesting. And when we got there, of course, it was Mr. Gore giving his now famous slideshow presentation. But at the time, I didn't know. I didn't know about this slideshow. I was probably the only person on the planet who didn't, but I didn't know what he had been doing. And I had this amazing experience at the end of it. This was before The Inconvenient Truth ever came out. And I was sitting in the audience when the lights came up, and I felt something rise up in me that said, I've got to help, I got to do something. It was like something in me had woken up that I could not make go back to sleep. And so my first thought was, hey, I know how to talk to people. I do that all the time. Put me in your army. I'll help. I can do slideshows. And my next thought was, well, you know, Kathy, that's your way of solving anything in your life. You just tap dance into the middle of things, get yourself a microphone and jump in the middle. And I kind of told myself to sit back down, and I thought it was just a frivolous thing. So a few months later, the movie came out, An Inconvenient Truth, and I found out that Mr. Gore was going to train 1,000 people to give this slideshow at a grassroots level. And I thought, now what's the odds that would be my first thought, and that would already be in his mind? I thought that was something maybe I should pay attention to. So at the time, as we've talked about all afternoon, it was called the Climate Project, and I joined up, and I was in the first class. There we are. Many of us, very many of us, I think, are in this room today, and this is us during the class on Mr. Gore's farm. And just to show you the kind of overachieving gal I am, there I am right there in the front row next to the guy. So this is one of the slides from the original slideshow, and it's meant to show our appetite for energy. This is a coal-fired electrical plant in the UK. It's meant to show how big the cooling towers are juxtaposed against these apartment buildings, so you can see how big our appetite for energy has grown. And they started to encourage us to make it personal, and I realized that this picture was familiar to me. This is a coal-fired electrical plant in my hometown. It turns out it's the largest coal-fired electrical plant east of the Mississippi River. It's giant. It was built when I was around 10 years old. We were all really glad because it was bringing jobs to the area. I just thought it made electricity. I knew it burned coal somewhere in the back of my mind, but I never made the connection in my whole life. I never made that connection. And I realized pretty quickly that if I was going to get involved in this slideshow, I was going to be talking about coal all the time. Both my grandfathers mined coal, but my dad got out of the mines, so I thought of coal mining as my parents' story, but not mine. This is my grandfather and grandmother on my dad's side. They were Italian immigrants. And this is my grandfather on the night shift at the Cannleton Coal Company in 1941. And this is my grandpa right there. He didn't speak very good English, but they said he could mine really great coal. He mined a 30-inch seam of coal with a pick. And my grandmother would sew leather strips across the back of his shirt so he could wedge himself in and pick sideways into the coal. This is my grandma and grandpa on my mom's side. He was also a coal miner. This is him in his later years. He died before I was born. And this is me standing on the steps of the company store that was run by the coal mine where my grandfather worked. This is where my mom and all her sisters, my grandmother and grandfather, and the whole community did their shopping. They paid them in script, which was sort of like play money that you could only redeem at the company store. And if you fell behind in your payments, you became an indentured servant because you could never catch up with the coal company. This is a picture of me standing on my cousin Jimbo's farm, which is about, if you drive from my mom's hometown to where I grew up, it's about a 10-minute drive up the river. About halfway is this farm. Me standing in front of these smokestacks, but they're actually cooling towers. That's actually steam coming out of them. I began to see that coal wasn't my parents' story at all. It was my story. I just had never known it. It was like the fish swimming around and saying, "Where's the water?" Okay, so meanwhile, the third thing that happened that seemed like it had nothing to do with any of these other things, a friend of mine that I really respect came to me one day and said, "Hey, I found this book. Can't get enough of it. I love it. It's called Nonviolent Communication." And I really respect this woman. So I went out and bought a copy. Long story short, several of us friends did, and that was in 2005. And we started meeting every Monday afternoon to study this book. It's about how we talk to each other. It has a lot to do with what they were talking about earlier in those living room conversations. Now it's 2012, and we still meet every Monday afternoon for 2 hours to study this book. So after a little while, in 2006, my friend comes to me and she says, "Hey, I just did a workshop with this guy, the guy that wrote the book. His name is Marshall Rosenberg." She said, "I don't know if you've ever thought about going and studying with him, but if you have, you should think about doing it soon because he's getting older and he's not going to do this much longer." So what did I do? I signed up for a workshop. And just to show you the kind of overachieving girl I am, there I am in the front row next to the guy. So we get into these workshops with Marshall. It's 9 days of a retreat. And he's teaching us all kinds of ways of listening to each other, ways of getting down to what we value and how to speak to each other from those places. And I realize that he's doing some social change workshops. And as I get further into that, I find that he's done these living room conversations between people in all of these countries around the world, Tutsis and Hutus, people in Northern Ireland, Protestants and Catholics, inner city gangs in LA and the police, all kinds of people facilitating conversation between people who are in terrible conflict. And that was completely unexpected for me. Okay, so that's my 3 coincidences. So I get into the climate project and I start giving the slideshow. This is me giving the slideshow in New York City. And this is another slide from the original slideshow. And it's meant to show how quickly we can destroy the environment and how quickly we can do damage beyond the tipping point because we have the technology to change the landscape on such a vast scale these days. And I thought, I did a little further research on the slide, and I found out that it was a copper strip mine in Mexico. And I thought, well, they were doing coal strip mining in the 70s when I was a kid. I remember all the talk about it. So maybe that's another way I can make this personal. I'll go find a picture of a coal strip mine, and I'll use that, and that'll kind of relate back to my own story and my own place. So I went surfing around on the internet, and this is what I found. This is a Google Earth picture, and the red is the footprint of one strip mine in West Virginia called the Hobet Mine. It's a mountaintop removal site. And to give you an idea of the scale of this mine, they superimposed it over the island of Manhattan. And you can see that it takes up almost half the island of Manhattan. This is one strip mine in West Virginia. Here's the Hobet Mine in 1984. And it had doubled in size by 3 years later. Here's what it looked like in 2002. Here it is in 2009, and they've just permitted a new section to be opened up. It's the largest strip mine east of the Mississippi River. And if you look up here in particular in this upper corner, they have to clean this coal because it has a lot of dirt and rock in it. And they do that on top of the mountain to purify the coal before they ship it down. And all the waste products from that get dammed off on top of the mountain into these sludge ponds. I have friends who in their community have a 9 billion gallon sludge pond dammed off at the top of their mountain. And every time a hard rain comes through, their kids go into a blind panic. Here's an aerial view of Hobet. And this is called a drag line. This is specifically the Big John drag line, which was built at Hobet. They have to bring them in parts because they're too big to bring on the roads. And just to give you an idea of the scale, down here on the bottom, these are bulldozers right here with people in them. There's a 10 stories high, and you can put 40 cars in the shovel. So we can damage the environment quite quickly. And what happened is, as the price of coal went up and demand for coal went up, this method of mining became more popular. And what they do is they bulldoze all the trees off to the side, bulldoze all the topsoil off, and they start dynamiting down until they get to a layer of coal that might be 6 inches deep. They scrape all that up and take it off to be cleaned, and then they blast down to the next layer. They're like layers of a cake. This used to not be feasible, but now partly because we have these big machines, there are less people required to do this kind of mining, and it becomes much more profitable for the mining companies. This is my friend Maria Gano, and she ran her hand over her friend's log cabin, and that's what came off. This is what's in the air that all these people are breathing, and she told me that she will find coal dust built up inside a closed chest freezer in her house with all of her windows closed and the air conditioning running. These are some of the other problems around these mines. This is the water that comes out of the tap. And there are many, many more problems, but this is just a small example. And someone earlier, I think it was Maggie, touched on how the propaganda sort of gets kept going. And this is one of the things back in Appalachia and coal country. The coal companies keep these big billboards up because it's a way of life and it's a tradition. And that way it keeps the conversation kind of going in one direction. This is a billboard in my hometown, the next slide, that nearly stopped me on the freeway when I saw it. Yes, coal. Clean, carbon neutral coal. I practically put my brakes on. I wanted to stand up and go, "Are you kidding me?" But this is another slide from the original slideshow, right? More doctors smoke Camels. This is the same dynamics that we're working with. And especially in Appalachia and coal country, economically it's a monoculture. So people are really, really afraid to lose their jobs. And this is part of how difficult the conversation is, because when someone has only one shot at having a decent job and being able to live near their family, they get really, really scared when you try to talk about a context where that might have to change, especially if you don't give them the time to listen to their fear and the time to talk about alternatives. So here's the next kind of synchronicity that happened to me. Coincidence. My phone rang one day, and it was Larry King Live. They called my office, and they said, "Look, they're going to have this funeral for these miners who died, and we're going to cover it live, and we'd like to have a song to get us out of that show. Would you be willing to come and sing a song?" So I gathered up some musician friends, went down to a studio in Nashville, a TV studio, and we beamed up a song in respect for these miners to add to this TV coverage. A bunch of musicians showed up on their own time, world-class musicians, not getting paid. They were just really, really glad to be able to contribute something after watching this horrible thing unfold. Coal miners tend to be forgotten until there's a mine disaster, and a bunch of them die. And so we spent the day just sort of with a lot of reverence and respect. And one of my dear friends said to me, "Kathy, this is what music is good for expressing things we can't put into words, for giving people comfort when words aren't enough." And I thought, well, maybe that's what I'll do with all this grief that I didn't understand. Maybe I'll make a record. Maybe I'll make a record about coal mining. Maybe I'll go all the way back through all the collection of songs about coal, find my favorites, and make a record. So that's what I did. And it took me back to the music of the place I grew up. I went back and picked up pieces in my own musical jigsaw puzzle that were missing that I didn't even know. And I went back to the Grammys for the first time in 15 years. So it was kind of a nice thing. Yeah. I lost. But I had 4-inch stiletto heels and a very short dress because, you know, the legs are the last thing to go, I'm just saying. So what happened is I started to research this music was I found all these wonderful writers who'd been writing about this life and coal and all of the conversation around it for decades. And I found these songs and I started to realize, my God, the conversation hasn't changed. These songs that were written so long ago, they're just as relevant now as they were when they were written. This is Jean Ritchie in her prime in the 70s. She was part of the folk revival in Greenwich Village. She grew up in a little town in East Kentucky called Viper, Kentucky. That's what she looks like today. And that's me and Jean at the Philadelphia Folk Festival where I got to interview her that summer for 2 hours and sing with her. It was just great. This is Cy Khan. Cy is a community organizer by trade and a wonderful songwriter, and I befriended him through this process. He's done lots of social change work in really difficult situations, and he's become my mentor. So I called him up one day. I said, Cy, how do you do it? He said, what? I said, you've been working on impossible stuff since the 60s, and you're the happiest guy I know. How do you do it? And he just started laughing. He said, oh, Kathy, you can't stop mountaintop removal. You can't do it. You can't fix climate change. You can't do it. He said, but you know, I used to work with mill workers in North Carolina, helping them organize into a union. And he said, when a guy's working on a loom, he's in a rhythm. And the next guy on the shift comes in, and before he clocks in, he comes in and he talks to the guy who's working his loom. And he says, hey, how's it going tonight? And he says, oh, it's really running smooth. Or he says, I don't know, man, threads have been breaking. I don't know what's wrong with it, but it's just temperamental today. And then he goes and he clocks in and he says, when the clock hits the top of the hour, this guy on the loom, they do a little dance. The loom never stops, and this guy steps out and the other guy steps in. And he said, Kathy, you can't stop mountaintop removal. You can't fix climate change. All you're doing is taking your shift at the loom. And I thought, okay, all right, good. It helps me. He said, we win a battle, we win something, and immediately everybody goes, oh, but the problem is still here. He said, I make them go out and have a beer. You go have a beer. We have to celebrate the victories because it's important. This is Hazel Dickens. Hazel died last year. This is Hazel in her prime. She's a West Virginia native and a treasure. And in my longer version of this slideshow, a lot of times I'll do songs from all of these people. But I'm going to do a song right now by Billy Ed Wheeler, and this is Billy Ed in his prime in the 60s. And this is Billy Ed today. And this is a song that he wrote 50 years ago, just about 50 years ago this year. And this is Bill Cooley, and Bill is a wonderful, wonderful guitarist who plays with me. And he'll be playing with me and my husband John tomorrow night as well. We're going to play a little music and talk about the environment and how music can really help get the message across. But this is a tune that Billy Ed wrote in the early 60s. And I befriended him when I recorded this. And I just love him. He's about to turn 80 years old in December. And he still writes songs. And he still cares about the environment. And his best friend was a coal operator in West Virginia. And they would get together and have living room conversations all the time. Now that our mountain is growing with people hungry for wealth, how come it's you that's a-going and I'm left all alone by myself? We used to hunt the cool caverns deep in our forest of green. Then came the road and the taverns, and you found a new love, it seems. Once I had you and the wildwood. Now it's just dusty roads. And I can't help but blaming your going on the coming of the roads. Look how they've cut all to pieces our ancient poplar and oak. And the hillsides are stained with the greases that burned up the heavens with smoke. You used to curse the bold, cruel men who stripped our earth of its ore. Now you've changed and you've gone over to them, and you've learned to love what you hated before. Once I thanked God for our treasure. Now, like rust, it corrodes, and I can't help but blaming your going on the coming of the roads. Once I thanked God for our treasure. Now, like rust, it corrodes, and I can't help but blaming your going on the coming of the roads. No, I can't help but blaming your going on the coming of the roads. Bill Cooley. So I had another couple of slides. Yeah, I just didn't know if you were, that was like the hook, but no one's back there telling me to stop. And I only have a couple more things. So I just wanted to say that as I got more into this nonviolent communication thing, we were doing the social change stuff, Marshall began to talk about these domination structures, which are basically the structures of power in our society, and how they're sort of put together to make us into nice, dead people. You're not nice, dead people. That's why you got on planes and came here. But basically, one of the things that I think is really important in the living room conversation and in the larger conversation, what he means by this is that in our culture, we are given from a very early age a very comfortable life, easy access to food and entertainment, so that basically a lot of times we just get up, we go to school, we graduate, we come home, we get out of school, we find a job, we get a family, we go to work, we raise our kids, until finally we get to the other end of our life and we've never gotten off the couch. We've just sort of looked up and our life was frittered away by our daily stuff. And we never got uncomfortable enough to look outside that little safe box. So Marshall says, we got to get off the couch. So what did I do? I got off the couch and I signed up for yet another retreat. And just to show you the kind of overachieving girl I am, well, it just went away. There I am. That's me next to the guy doing the retreat. This is Robert Gonzalez. He teaches nonviolent communication, and I'm learning from him how to become a teacher of nonviolent communication, a place I never thought my life would go. Since January of 2010, I've spoken at the West Virginia State Capitol, the Kentucky State Capitol, the Tennessee State Capitol. We've put on a benefit for mountaintop removal. This is me and Emmylou Harris singing a duet. It was a died and gone to heaven moment for me. Just to let you guys know how much I'm willing to give up for environmental causes. That's me over there with Dave Matthews with his arm around me. Tough moment for the cause. Yeah. So I want to just end by telling you about Judy Bonds. And Judy was my friend and an activist from West Virginia. And when I was in the middle of my first nonviolent training with Marshall Rosenberg, I got an email from Judy. She said, "Kathy, I don't even know why I'm emailing you, but I just thought maybe you could help us. We're really afraid. The tensions are rising up here in the coal fields, and we're afraid someone's going to get killed. And I just thought maybe you might be able to do something. People stand across the street from my house all night, every night, shouting death threats at me and my family." I thought, now what are the odds that Judy Bonds would send me an email that says, "Can you help us? We're afraid someone's going to get killed," when I'm at a training for nonviolent communication. From her email, I wound up setting up a negotiation, a living room conversation that wound up taking place in the governor's mansion of West Virginia with a mediator from nonviolent communication circles, the governor of West Virginia, 2 activists, and someone from the United Mine Workers. It was quite an eye-opening evening, and I don't know that we changed the world, but we did hear each other a little bit more, and it gave me great hope about what these living room conversations might be able to accomplish. Judy died in January of last year from brain cancer, and that's one of the effects of these mines is cancer clusters, and there was a cancer cluster in Judy's community, and she wound up passing away. When she died, she was a Pizza Hut waitress by trade. She had an 8th grade education, and her obituary was printed in all of these newspapers. So if you have a moment of doubt that you, as one small citizen, can make a difference, that the living room conversation you're about to have might ripple into bigger circles, then you can see where you sit. Think about Judy Bonds and what she was able to do in the world with a very limited education and a lot of passion and a keen mind. So as a finish, I would love to ask you to do the 10-second experiment with me. I'd like to count to 10, and I would ask you to all just take a moment and look around the room and count everything you see that has any red on it. All right, go. There's no right answer to this. You will each have a different number in your head. Just go with me on this. Okay, stop. You have a number in your head. That's the only important thing. Of how many red things you saw. How many blue things did you see? It's a trick question. But there is a point to it. If we go out into the world and we look at a world that cannot change, that's what we will find. And if we go out into the world and we look for the pockets of people who might be open-minded enough to change, that's what we will find. So I just wanted to remind you that you have a lot more power from the way, we have a lot more power, all of us, from the way we approach things and the way we look at the world than we might think we have. So do I have time to do one more song, I guess? Okay. All right. This is a song that I started singing at all kinds of environmental gatherings, some for Mr. Gore, some for other coal-related issues. And this is a tune that Jean Ritchie wrote in 1972. And this was about her, sort of her feelings about the environment. It's based in Christian language. Please try to listen beyond that if some people are sort of off-put by the language of other religions. But Old Testament Southern Baptist roots go deep in Appalachia, and that was Jean's roots. I asked her about this song one day. I said, "Were you just mad about the environment? Were you mad about what you were seeing?" She said, "Well, no, honey, I was home and I was ironing, and it was really hot." And that's where I started.
And my Lord, he said unto me, do you like my garden so fair? You may live in this garden if you keep the grasses green. And I'll return in the cool of the day. And my Lord, he said unto me, do you like my garden so pure? You may live in this garden if you keep the waters clean. And I'll return in the cool of the day. Now is the cool of the day. Now is the cool of the day. Oh, this earth, it is a garden, the garden of my Lord. And he walks in his garden in the cool of the day. And my Lord, he said unto me, do you like my pasture so green? You may live in this garden if you will feed my lambs. And I'll return in the cool of the day. Now is the cool of the day. Now is the cool of the day. Oh, this earth, it is a garden, the garden of my Lord. And he walks in his garden in the cool of the day. Yes, he walks in his garden in the cool of the day.
Thank you.